spitting syllables, soliloquies so simple as these. It's Trivium and Quadrivium, a podcast with a purpose to save humanity and enlighten the dark. I'm your host, King Cooper. I want to give back. At first, giving away $1 million seemed like a good idea, but that would only make one person happy. To bring cheer to an entire city, I'll be giving away free candy. Keep your eyes peeled for my free candy vans that will be driving around. Zimmy Zam Boomafoo. We're starting off with philosophy. Last week, I mentioned Trivium and Quadrivium as an education in liberal arts. It began in Plato's Republic, where the Quadrivium was explained. I'll be covering Book 7 in the Republic, verses 521 through 531. It is a conversation between Socrates and Glaucon. Here, and in the entire Republic, they are discussing how to make a great city. The Quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy are the subjects that should be taught in their fictional city to make people better. Note, the term quadrivium was not used by Plato, but coined later. We start by discussing the problem of ruling, solved because we'll be giving just orders to just people. That leads into the problem of how to make just people. Socrates says, turning a soul from a day that is a kind of night is true philosophy. That is the perspective he will use when searching for subjects. How to lift up a soul. Education mustn't be useless to warlike men. If people are spending all their time learning what has no utility, then an army will easily wipe them out, and all that studying was for naught. They had already discussed educating people on music and poetry since its rhythms gave them a certain rhythmic quality, and its stories, whether fictional or nearer the truth, cultivated other habits akin to these. There's an argument for reading fiction. But they're looking for more, settling on the inconsequential matter of distinguishing the 1, the 2, and the 3. Number and calculation, what we call arithmetic. Since they're using war as their standard, there's a story about a soldier in the Trojan War counting the enemy's ships, since no one had done it. And that Agamemnon, leader of the Greeks, if he truly couldn't count, didn't even know how many feet he had. Being able to count would lead one to know if their army is bigger than another's and how they should be positioned and maneuvered. Socrates is fixated on ideas that summon us into being, saying, if each is 1 and both 2, the soul will understand that the 2 are separate. This may seem small to those who know how to count, but it is a different world to know you have 2 feet and can control each 1. Alternatively, the whole universe would be an amalgamation with no way to divide. Arithmetic is valuable as it leads the soul forcibly upward and compels it to discuss the numbers themselves, never permitting anyone to propose for discussion numbers attached to visible and tangible bodies. The subject that comes after numbers is geometry, insofar as it pertains to war. When it comes to setting up camp, occupying a region, concentrating troops, deploying them, or with regard to any of the other formations an army adopts in battle or on the march, it makes all the difference whether someone is a geometer or not. I can attest to using geometry with maps and being able to find an unknown location by calculating with geometric lessons. To quote Socrates, geometry is knowledge of what always is. Then it draws the soul towards the truth and produces philosophical thought by directing upwards what we now wrongly direct downwards. Since we have numbers, and numbers on a plane make geometry, the next step would be the study of how these shapes move with astronomy. Movement is change of location over time. This would give better awareness of the seasons, months, and years, appropriate for a farmer or navigator. Astronomy compels the soul to look upward and leads it from things here to things there. This is a good metaphor for what I discuss on the show. We attempt to look up for the good, distinguished from the lesser. For as Socrates said, it's very different to realize that in Every soul there's an instrument that is purified and rekindled by such subjects when it has been blinded and destroyed by other ways of life. The final subject Plato gets into is harmonics, what we label music. For as the eyes fasten on astronomical motions, so the ear fastens on harmonic ones. The book discusses people attempting to find smaller intervals in notes, but they put ears before understanding. Harmonics is about numerical relationships. In an octave, two notes next to each other don't sound well together. The relation of notes might jump to a fifth, then down to the third before returning to the key being played. Different keys create relationships with different notes. There is my explanation of Plato's Quadrivium. Along with the trivium will be the basis of topics covered on Wrecking and Rapping. Please take a moment to subscribe or follow the channel. We'll be reading the Bible next. Amen. 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 Psalm number 9 highlights God's role as a refuge for the oppressed and judge of the wicked. Here is Psalm number 9. I will praise thee, O Lord, with my whole heart. I will show forth all thy marvelous works. I will be glad and rejoice in thee. I will sing praise to thy name, O thou most high. When mine enemies are turned back, they shall fall and perish at thy presence. For thou hast maintained my right and my cause. Thou sattest in the throne judging right. Thou hast rebuked the heathen. Thou hast destroyed the wicked. Thou hast put out their name for ever and ever. O thou enemy, destructions are come to a perpetual end, and thou hast destroyed cities. Their memorial is perished with them. But the Lord shall endure for ever. He hath prepared his throne for judgment, and he shall judge the world in righteousness. He shall minister judgment to the people in uprightness. The Lord also will be a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble. And they that know thy name will put their trust in thee, for thou, Lord, hast not forsaken them that seek thee. Since praises to the Lord, which dwelleth in Zion, declare among the people his doings. When he maketh inquisition for blood, he remembereth them, he forgetteth not the cry of the humble. Have mercy upon me, O Lord. Consider my trouble which I suffer of them that hate me. Thou that liftest me up from the gates of death, that I may show forth all thy praise in the gates of the daughter of Zion. I will rejoice in thy salvation. The heathen are sunk down in the pit that they made. In the net which they hid is their own foot taken. The Lord is known by the judgment which he executeth. The wicked is snared in the work of his own hands. Hegein, Selah. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. For the needy shall not always be forgotten. The expectation of the poor shall not perish forever. Arise, O Lord, let not man prevail. Let the heathen be judged in thy sight. Put them in fear, O Lord, that the nations may know themselves to be but man. Selah. This is the word of the Lord. To go through some of those verses, in verse number 1, I will show forth all thy marvelous works. Sing praise to the glory of God and all that we've been given. There may also be a call to go tell it on the mountain. In verse 4, thou hast maintained my right and my cause. Through God we are justified. People like to say they're on the right side of history, but there's only one that looks at all time and passes judgment. In verse 5, thou hast rebuked the heathen, thou hast destroyed the wicked, thou hast put out their name forever and ever. There's a reoccurring mention that baddies will have their names removed from the book of life. I don't know if this is an actual book, like St. Peter at the pearly gates checks for your name in heaven, or is another way of saying unlifed. Also destroyed the wicked, for all those that like to idolize the musical. In verse 9, the Lord will be a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble. Refuge means a place of safety. The Lord protects. In verse 10, Lord, hast not forsaken them that seek thee. The door opens for those that knock. If someone is genuinely seeking God, they will find it. Alternatively, those reading the Bible to prove their atheistic arguments will find the magic book protected as a babble of words. In verse 12, when he maketh inquisition for blood, he remembereth them. He forgetteth not the cry of the humble. Inquisition is an inquiry, examination. God is never going to ask for more than you can give. Often you will be given great strength to perform a great sacrifice. In verse 15, in the net which they hid is their own foot taken. Touching on what I said about those reading the Bible for argument's sake, the evil plan people create damages themselves. In verse 16, Hegeon appears next to Selah and has a similar meaning to pause or for reflection. In verse 17, the wicked shall be turned into hell and all the nations that forget God. We see this happening today. Countries attempting to remove religion from their foundation and seeing things go sideways. This happens because, in verse 20, the nations may know themselves to be but men. Being man means they're flawed. They can't know every variable, and even their best laid plans will cause unforeseen problems. How about we lighten things up with some rap? This week's song is called Twisted from the compilation album Shady XV. I'll be doing a verse by Yelawolf. Round and round we roll, where it stops, baby, nobody knows. Some people go crazy and they lose control. Some people jump off, some people won't let go. Some people say love, some people say why. Some people don't love, they just want a free ride. The rain won't stop, it'll never dry. If she's in the house of pain, then love is standing outside. Time to break down the bars. This is the hook on the song and starts with round and round we roll, where it stops, nobody knows. My research says the origin of this is the song Abracadabra by the Steve Miller Band. And that lyric was inspired by a spinning wheel, similar to roulette or Wheel of Fortune, from a show called The Original Amateur Hour. How I take the line on my own would be like the earth spinning or revolving around the sun. Keeps going round and no man knows the time it will stop. An interesting side note that this is an Eminem song, and his recent single, Houdini, also drew inspiration from the song Abracadabra. Then there's a lot of lines saying some people, they go crazy and lose control, some jump off and some won't let go, drawing a contrast with the extremes, something we make sure to avoid thanks to Stoicism. Jump off would be the ledge, calling it quits, and letting go is holding on too tight, which leads to problems of fear and anxiety, since they're not ready for change. Some people say love, and some say why, more contrasting statements. There are people that try to spread peace and happiness, while others don't understand that. Maybe they're searching for personal gain. The next line says, the people that don't love just want a free ride. We covered free riders last week as a problem for the golden rule. They might accept love and help from others with no intention of paying it forward. The last two lines seem connected. Rain won't stop, it'll never dry. Wordplay with the opposites. Rain is wet, opposite of dry. The rain also seems likely to be tears. A person is crying because they don't love, leading to, she is in the house of pain and love is standing outside. Pain would be a reason why someone is crying, and if love is outside, that says to me she doesn't want to let love into her life, leading to endless pain and suffering. And that reminds me of a Shakespearean sonnet I heard recently, where he urges a young man to acknowledge his own beauty and the love he receives, then to act on it by marrying and having children. This is Shakespeare's Sonnet number 10. For shame! Deny that thou bearest love to any who for thyself art so unprovident. Grant, if thou wilt, thou art beloved of many, but that thou none lovest is most evident. For thou art so possessed with murderous hate, that 'gainst thyself thou stickest not to conspire, seeking that beauteous roof to ruinate. which to repair should be thy chief desire. Oh, change thy thought that I may change my mind. Shall hate be fairer lodge than gentle love? Be as thy presence is, gracious and kind, or to thyself at least kind-hearted prove. Make thee another self for love of me, that beauty still may live in thine or thee. After this, we're done with sonnets for a while. All he does is talk about get married and have kids again and again. I might read some random Shakespeare, but I think I'd like to pick a new poet. I have my granddad's complete works of Edgar Allan Poe, so maybe we'll explore that. But let's wreck his written. Right out the gate, he says, "For shame! How could you do such a thing? After 10 sonnets on children and love, you still don't get the message? Deny that thou bearest love to any. That's why you're single, claiming to love none. But that puts you in the House of Pain." And House of Pain also makes me think of the School of Hard Knocks. That's why Shakespeare calls the young man unprovident, meaning a lack of foresight and failing to prepare for the future. He reminds us that thou art beloved of many, saying the individual is loved by a lot of people, but thou none lovest is most evident. They don't love anyone. To be loved and not love others, Shakespeare condemns, saying, "Thou art possessed with murderous hate." We covered last week that not loving leaves the world to wail, and against thyself thou stickest not to conspire. Seems like the act of not loving is against thyself, and not conspire would be not partnering up with someone else. Seeking the beauteous roof to ruinate. Ruinate means to damage, ruin. That might be the roof over their head that protects us and keeps us dry, which is repair should be thy chief desire. Shakespeare wants the man to reconsider his priorities and focus on building a home. Oh, he says, change thy thought that I might change my mind. That's some fun wordplay. At first hearing of change thy thought, I wondered if the expression change my mind existed already. He says, change your actions, and I will change my opinion of them. Shall hate be fairer lodge than gentle love? The path of being single and making the world cry in your absence is a choice made in hate. Shakespeare points out it's easier for the person to live in hate than to find love. Glorious love. Be as thy presence is, gracious and kind. A compliment of a sort, saying the man is gracious and kind, that he needs to act that way. Be it. Or to thyself at least be kind-hearted, prove. If you can't be kind, be at least kind-hearted in changing thy ways. Make thee another self for love of me. For the love of Shakespeare, get married and have babies. It's what he would want for you. That beauty still may live in thine or thee. If choosing love, then beauty will continue on in this world through you and yours. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a comment. I'd love for you to join the conversation. Now it's time for the Wreck of the Week. What's wrecking King Cooper's week? My wife's cooking. I love my wife's cooking. The air quotes problem is she cooks too much. Almost every meal is freshly made and leaves leftovers for several more meals. Physically, I can't and shouldn't eat it all. I also struggle with throwing food out. Of course, I don't want to throw out fresh food, but I debate on some barely edible stuff too. It seems to be learned by growing up not so rich to eat all my food. Like we were competing around the dinner table to eat as much as possible before it was all gone. I don't know what I can do with this woman besides love her for the rest of my life. But speaking of my wife's cooking, and in honor of Fat Tuesday being this past week, we've got a nice little, she got us a king cake, and you can see there's a little crown on the yellow, purple, and gold, because we all know that's how the royalty roll, and there's a little baby, because that's a thing for king cakes. Supposedly they like to drink babies. I've heard of such things. They used to bake babies into a king cake. But enough wrecking. Let's calm down with some meditations. That's Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. We'll be finishing up Book 1, Chapter 16, reading verses 6 through 10. Most importantly, his readiness to defer ungrudgingly to those with some special ability. It might be in literary expression or the study of laws or customs or any other subject, and to give them his own active support to reach acknowledged eminence in their own specialties, acting always in accordance with tradition, yet not making the preservation of tradition an overt aim. Further, no liking for change and chance, but a settled habit in the same places and the same practices. To resume instantly after attacks of migraines, fresh again and vigorous for his usual work. Not to keep many matters secret to himself, only a very few exceptional cases, and those solely of state concern. Sense and moderation in such things as the provision of shows, contracting of public works, doles, and distributions. The act of a man with an eye for precisely what needs to be done, not the glory of its doing. He was not one to bathe at all hours. He had no urge to build houses. He was not particular about food, the material and color of his clothes, or youthful beauty in his servants. The fact that his dress came from Lurium, sent up from his country house there, the many details of his way of life at Lanavium, how he handled the apologetic customs officer in Tusculum, and all such modes of behavior. Nothing about him was harsh, relentless, or impetuous, and you would never say of him that he broke out a sweat, but everything was allotted in its own time and thought. As by a man of leisure, his way was unhurried, organized, vigorous, consistent in all. What is recorded of Socrates would apply to him too, that he would regulate abstinence and enjoyment where many people are too weak-willed to abstain and enjoy too indulgently. Strength of character and endurance or sobriety, as the case may be, signifies the man of full and indomitable spirit, as was shown by Maximus in his illness. Going through some of that. Readiness to defer ungrudgingly to those with some special ability. Don't assume you know everything, or that the king should be the best at everything. Let experts in their field handle their field, to give them his own active support to reach acknowledged eminence in their own specialities. If someone is good at something you aren't, throw your support behind them rather than sabotage. This is the basis of capitalism, specialization. Acting always in accordance with tradition, yet not making the overt preservation of tradition an aim. Tradition doing what you're supposed to because it has been tested and the results speak for themselves. Not making preservation an overt aim is not squeezing too tight, thinking if we don't cross every T and dot every I, the whole empire will crumble. If we can't keep a tradition for a good reason, so be it. A settled habit in the same place and the same practices. This is a recommendation for how to practice tradition. Go to the same places, do the same things, get the same results. Not to keep many matters secret to himself. Be ashamed of nothing, not because of arrogance, but through acting with good intentions. Sense and moderation in such things as provisions of show, contracting of public works, doles, and distributions. These are the sort of bread and circus provided by the empire. Doles means benefits paid by the government. Know when to step in and when to step back, allowing others to stand for themselves. An eye for precisely what needs to be done, not the glory of its doing. Recognizing problems that need fixing is good, even better if we begin fixing them without being told to. He was not particular about food, the material and color of his clothes, or youthful beauty in his servants. These are the traps people with wealth fall into all the time. They are all earthly goods, and none of them lift up the soul. No one would say he was impetuous, meaning done forcefully, without thought or care. And you would never say of him that he broke out a sweat, but everything was allotted its own time and thought. How very stoic. If you're struggling, you're using the wrong tool. Think through a problem rather than attempting to muscle through it. unhurried, organized, vigorous, consistent in all. Being hurried will make one shaky, and being organized will keep from feeling hurried. Vigorous is full of energy, and there should be no weak points, as that would imply issues lacking proper care. He could regulate abstinence and enjoyment, where many people are too weak-willed to abstain or enjoy too indulgently. Stay in control when need be, and let down one's hair during down time. Being out of control, either too sloppy or stingent, is undesirable. Strength of character and endurance or sobriety, as the case may be. Similar to last, strength of character is control over the self, not letting emotions or circumstance call the shots. Moving on to This Week in History. In my history book, it was talking about the Earth forming before humans started popping up, stating that 20,000 years ago, ice from the poles had extended halfway down to the equator. Then 10,000 years ago, humans would begin to take shape. I'm not an expert in anything I'm about to talk about, but am merely exploring my thought process, and that thought is that all of our ancient dates are wrong. Recently, I saw a museum talking about how some clothes they had discovered were 100,000 years old. Well, if most of the Earth was covered in ice, it doesn't seem like the experts agree on that date either. From what I've seen, carbon dating has been debunked and can regularly be fooled into thinking a brick put into the ground a week ago is 1,000,000 years old. A big problem being the daters ask, how old do you think it is? And that's their starting point. Google tells me the most complete dinosaur fossil is Sue, a T-Rex that's 90% complete. To me, that's a 10% error at least, since no telling it's all from the same animal, and we're piecing it together. But people have the audacity to make predictions 65 million years ago. If you're 10% off target and extend that over a distance of 65 million years, you're nowhere near the target in the end. There's also the issue that other dinosaurs are said to be another 60 million years older than that. What hubris, claiming to understand what is happening for 60 million years, starting 60 million years ago. Not to mention, there's only one Earth. You can't look at the layers of ice or sediment and say, this layer is millions of years old, because what is the fact sheet it's being compared to? How can it be tested? So anything prehistoric is a fiction to me. I don't care if it's 10,000 years or 10 million years. And I'm not saying there were never any big animals, but there was probably an ego trip with some scientists where older discoveries garnered more fame and the institutions benefited from it. The same happens today, where a rock star scientist with 200 groundbreaking discoveries is found out to be lying for over a decade. Let's get back to solid ground. Are you ready? We've got math. The numbers are 7, 2, 8, and 3. So I took a while to solve this one because I kept looking for complicated ways of doing it. All these multiplications, dividing. I even attempted 7 times 8. Do you know how far away from 24 that gets us? When all I needed to do was go backwards to 6 times 4. So 7 minus 3 is 4. 8 minus 2 is 6. 6 times 4, we all know, is 24. Final thought, see with your eyes, hear with your ears, think with your soul. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a nice day. Goodbye.